Just say it, man. Don't make me ask 20 questions.
What is the point?
Get to the point.
Just say it already!
Welcome to the Podcram. I recently added this to my top 5 favorite podcasts of all time. Chris Williamson and George Mack discuss what it means to be a high-agency human on Modern Wisdom 919.
This is a long time coming, I think. Agency, since we've been talking, is the topic, the thing that we've both been obsessed with the most. So, introduce people to it. What's high agency?
High agency is, in my opinion, the most under-discussed and most important idea in, let's say, the 21st century. It's one of those ideas that once you see it, you can't quite unsee it. It's everywhere. But the problem with it is it's quite hard to define. The way to identify the highest agency person in your life is if you woke up here and you have sweat with dirt and dirt with sweat all over your body. You've not drank in days and you've woken up in a third world prison cell and you have a phone passed under your door and you can call one person to try and get you out of there. Who is it? And everybody weirdly has this kind of idea in their head of who they would call in this scenario. And when you actually begin to grill people about who they would call, it's not the amount that they bench press. It's not the car that they drive. It's not the novels that they've read. It's not the family background they're from. It's maybe sometimes. If they're the royal family, then maybe. It's something else. And that something is high agency. Imagine you have 2 doors. Behind them are all the people you would call when stuck in a third world jail. And at the other end of the spectrum is peak low agency, is the last people that you would call when stuck in a third world jail. If you were stuck in like a paper bag, you wouldn't call them, right?
Yeah.
And what is the fundamental difference between these two groups? Because if you looked at them on paper, you go, there's no gender, race, age, politics, wealth, career title, LinkedIn profile. Like what specifically is it? And I was stuck on this idea for years, like trying to chip away. And essentially kind of came to the conclusion of like, this is actually the most simple way of defining high agency is, are they happening to life or is life happening to them? So what you'll ultimately, anybody who you would call to break you out of a third world jail, you would define as happening to life. The people that you would be least likely to break you out of a third world jail are the ones that life is happening to them. And then once you begin to see that spectrum, it's such a more simple, like Occam's razor of really understanding high agency. And fundamentally, this isn't, it can be like a nice, okay, this is a cool like self-help concept, but actually agency is bigger than that. Out of the 6 to 7 million species on Earth, human beings are the only ones capable of agency. In the known universe of what we know, and by the way, we only know this via agency, we are the only thing that we know of capable of agency. Even today, like we are sat in a studio in London, and I was listening to David Deutsch explain this concept of we're in London today, and it's only thanks to agency, because it's December right now in London, that me and you aren't dead within 2 to 3 hours, because it's the clothes that we wear, human agency, it's the heating here. Like the UK itself is a product of agency, of human agency, because without clothing, which we kind of born into and assume has always been a thing, but no, it was the result of human agency. Without heating, another thing that we just take completely for granted, the UK would not be possible. So he argues that this idea that we're going to go to Mars and terraform it and shape it, that it's actually a livable habitat, the UK is already that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody should feasibly live here, but it's just human agency.
It's agency all the way down.
All the way down. And that's why once you see it, you can't fundamentally unsee it, because it's not the only thing that makes human beings unique, but we are the only species that is fundamentally capable of happening to life. So we have 2 contrasts here. One end of the spectrum, we have the US Department of Education on the low agency end, which something around $20,000 to $30,000 they spend on students per year. And they are ranked, so it's the highest in the world the US spends on education. Meanwhile, they're ranked between 20th and 35th, both for literacy and numeracy. So spending so much money, getting so little out of it. It's a wild stat of something along the lines of over 50% of Americans have lower than 6th grade literacy.
Yep.
So on the right end is one of the best books I've ever listened to. It's about an hour long. And I'll just open up the question first, because this completely reset this question for me, which is, what is a 10-year-old capable of? And this book kind of answers that question. So it's called Don't Tell Me I Can't. It's written by a 14-year-old at the time called Cole Summers. And essentially, just to contrast it to the Department of Education, it starts with him very early on, around about 5 or 6 years old. And his dad served in the military and had issue in training that basically left him disabled and with injuries for the rest of his life. And one day, he's getting raised by his dad, and he's about to hit the age of going to primary school. And they see these kids like misbehaving and saying some like awful shit outside of their house. And they decide, you know what, we're gonna homeschool them. And he opts in for that decision. He goes, I don't want to hang out with those kids. Unfortunately, his dad then ends up needing lots of operations throughout his homeschooling, and he one day is kind of sat there. His dad's recovering from all these surgeries, and he says to his dad, "How do people get rich?" And his dad just replies, I imagine at the time, on so much medication and just trying to keep his kid busy. He goes, "I don't know," because they're a poor family. He goes, "Maybe go and watch some Warren Buffett videos on YouTube." So 6-year-old goes and start watching Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger videos on YouTube, consumes everything about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, understands like Munger's iron laws of prescription, starts learning everything about business and compound interest, all but for himself on YouTube. Then at the age of 7, just goes, well, I'll just start my first company. 7-year-old starts his first company, selling rabbits to the local restaurants, gets it up to $1,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And that's real revenue, not like a Shopify bullshit screenshot, right? $1,000 for a 7-year-old. At the age of 8, he then learns about Amazon not paying tax. He goes, how is Amazon not paying tax? So he starts just teaching himself the tax code online at the age of 8. At the age of 9, he buys his first vehicle, like a car.
What's he do with it?
For the farm. So it's not him, but he owns the vehicle, but people are working on it, yeah. And at the age of 10, he buys his first house for $10,000, watches YouTube videos, learns like flooring, how to do the wiring, completely flips the house, makes a profit on the house. And
has he got any help? Is anyone assisting him with this?
I don't know the ins and outs of that specifically. I'll probably do more research on that, but the book is incredible. And there's a bit in there where he goes to scouts because he's still interacting with the kids. But what the crazy thing is he didn't know that wasn't normal. He was just going online. And he goes to scouts and he's chatting to the other kids about like what they've been up to that day. And they're saying, yeah, we've just been remembering the planets. And like, so we have Earth here and Mars and da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, when are we ever going to use this? And he goes, what about you? What have you been up to? And he chats to them about like payroll, tax compliance. It's picturing this 9-year-old at Scouts. But not that, I think the key asterisk on that story is not that everybody should, not every 10-year-old should be buying their own house, but it makes you question like the education model that we discussed earlier. And I think that's probably one of the biggest inputs of low agency into people. And his story in particular, makes you question, well, what is a young person capable of?
Well, I suppose the education system in both America and in the UK, I don't know if there's anywhere that it isn't. Very much life is happening to you.
Yes.
There is no you happening. You're not, until, when's the first time in the UK school system that you get to choose your sort of speciality? Sort of 13? It's after year 9, I think. Mm-hmm. Remember, you're going to pick your GCSEs that you're going to focus on. And then from there, you pick your AS, you pick your A levels, then you pick your degree. So up until that point, up until the age of 12, 13, you're just on a set of train tracks. You don't even get to discriminate what you learn, let alone how you learn, in broad strokes. And then in specific strokes, it's like, well, this is the sequence. This is how the curriculum is put together. And what's your thing about the behaviors that you were rewarded for in early life are the ones that you get punished for in later life.
Yes. Like in school, if you copy people, you're punished and given a detention. In life, if you copy people, you're labeled a successful franchisee owner. But there's like endless amounts of those behaviors where a lot of adult life is about, from my experience at least, seems to be about unlearning behaviors that happened during school. When you actually go down the rabbit hole of the education system, like this Prussian model that came over, and it was primarily created to create industrial factory workers. And it still looks like that to this very day. That you have bells that ring.
They used the same bells in British schools that they were using in the factories. Like the most Pavlovian early on conditioning.
It's fucking wild. You have somebody who's in charge of the classroom. You have people moved from cell to cell. Uniform.
Yeah.
And you're told when you can eat. You're told when you can go to the bathroom. You have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom.
It does feel like if you're trying to create a highly agentic populace, school isn't exactly the best preparation.
There's a great line of general ambition gives you anxiety, specific ambition gives you direction. But I mean, specificity everywhere is so important. Even in writing or talking, the more specific that you are, the more impactful it can be. And I actually find the reason why specificity, we avoid it, people in the vague trap, or at least myself, the reason why we avoid it is because there's a failure point.
There's no criteria for success. There's no criteria for failure.
Yeah. And if you can just live in that generality, it's impossible to ever have agency, I think. If you look at the vague trap and how often it comes up, it's because of just, even the question he asked there, it's just it's a complete lack of clear thinking. It's just like muddy thinking, what I call it, is just like vague GIFs in my head, or like JPEGs or words that are popping up. And it's never going, what does that mean? Or writing that down, getting more specific. Like a great example would be, how can I be happy? It's probably the vaguest fucking question that's ever existed. And if you just view the brain as a questioning, answering device that we're constantly asking questions, and you basically, it's like asking a computer just an endless loop that never closes, and it just completely expands into infinity, which then leads to this anxiety. But let's say, for example, example of general question, how can I be happy? Specific question would be, what does my dream week look like hour by hour? What does my nightmare week look like hour by hour? Where am I right now between the two? And then what's the easiest first step to move up that? That's so much more specific versus like a general thing. And I think that's probably the biggest sign I notice whenever I'll get a DM, whether it's a personal thing or a business thing. The easiest questions to answer, or the best people, are always, the most high agency people, it tends to be super specific. I've tried A, B, C, D, E. I saw that you mentioned F. I've done this specific thing here.
Yeah.
This problem happened here. What do you think? Versus, hey mate, I want to do this. Anything? Question mark.
Yeah.
Like, it's so vague, and as a result, it's so boundless that you could almost never apply knowledge because it's too general. There's a meme where there's a huge queue on one side, and then there's no queue for the next thing. And the one queue with the loads of people behind it is like how to make money. And then the other one is like how to provide value to people. Yeah. And it's kind of a similar thing to charisma, right? Is that ultimately making money is just value exchange at scale. But we often think of like, how do I extract resources from people versus how do I actually give something, turn it into a positive sum game? I've never thought about it like that. That's a really good point. I know we've spoken about this before, of the How to Know a Person, that book. There's a story in that How to Know a Person where it's a teacher in front of a classroom, and one of the kids asks, "Are you married, miss?" And she's like, "Oh, no. And they go, "Why?" Go, "I'm divorced." And they're like, "Why?" And they just keep going that, and in 2 minutes she's just flooding in tears.
Fuck's sake.
Flooding in tears, and it goes back to the education stuff where they're so naive. They're just, why?
Alan was talking about that too, that there's this sort of innocent spontaneity, this unencumbered transparency that kids have, and we have a kind of envy about them. The lack of social mores that have shaved off the interesting parts of their personality. And so much of adult life is getting back to that more childlike curiosity state, I think. Okay, so people want to become more high agency, presumably. We've said it's important. We've identified what it is, how it works, some ways that people can fall into traps to stop them from being it, some beliefs that those people have. Give me a pair of breasts, give me something tangible.
I've got an idea here. The kid asking his teacher questions gave me an idea for a meditation practice. Pick something bad in your life and ask yourself why it's that way, but then answer with a highly agentic, extreme ownership sort of response. Then ask why again, and again respond with ownership, and just rinse and repeat and see how deep you can go proving your agency over the situation. I think this line of creative reasoning would be a good reflex to develop, as opposed to the self-pity party victimhood narrative so many of us publicly educated are inclined to. If you have an idea for increasing agency, drop it in the comments. Thanks for listening to this installment of The Podcram. I hope it contains something useful for you. If you enjoyed these selections and are curious about the curator's own thoughts, you can check out my other podcast, Psychic Lube, where I share concise concepts meant to grease the intellectual gears and help get your creative juices flowing. Each episode is an ongoing collaborative project that welcomes listeners to expand or rebut its points by email or comment, the most interesting of which get incorporated through periodic re-recordings. As always, if you're intrigued by today's content, I encourage you to go listen to the full podcast in its original form directly from its creators so that their sponsors keep paying them to make stuff for us and nobody feels compelled to sue me for copyright infringement. Now, get off your phone and go do smart stuff. Have a productive day.